NightMerica is an independently produced podcast. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And please tell your friends about us.
Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation. Because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods.
Episode 14, Robbers, Giants, and One Ticket to Carnie Town. As always, I am one half of the hosting duo. I'm Aaron Sagers. You might know me from Paranormal Caught on Camera on Travel Channel, Paranormal Paparazzi, ParanormalPopCulture.com, and I am joined by my cohort, my colleague, my co-host, my codependent paranormal nerd.
Britt, am I codependent? Is that how you would describe me? I don't think so.
I was just looking for other co-words. Cohort?
Cohort.
Compadre?
Oh, I like that.
Colleague?
That's a good one. Yeah.
Co-conspirator?
Yes, perfect.
People, and if you're listening to this, send us your other co-words.
Yep.
But we can cooperate together. So, wait. So first, let's do the news. We have to dive into that. So, the news. But first, the news. I like saying it like that. What's your news article for the day?
So my news article for the day, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to trump the Sasquatch selling the home. Like, that's just perfection. But this week, we are going back to California for my weird news, and we're going to San Francisco. And the Golden Gate Bridge just installed these new, panels, the metal bike panel lane. What did I just say?
I don't know, but I'm following. Well, I'm not really following, but I'm being supportive.
Oh, goodness. Guys, I took my HR exam yesterday. It's 6:30 in the morning, and I'm exhausted, but I passed. So bear with me. But the bike lane in the Golden Gate, San Francisco, installed new metal panels for safety and, bridge restoration. But now, when the wind blows a certain way, it now plays music. It howls, it hums, and people have been blowing up the San Francisco helpline, their 311 number, because people are hysterical and going crazy over having this constant hum in their ears, and you can hear it all over. So there's people at the Land's End, that part of the island, that are hearing it miles away. So I think that's pretty crazy.
Is it playing a certain song? Is it Rick-rolling the people that are driving across the Golden Gate Bridge?
It would be awesome if it was something specific, but no, it's just this super eerie, weird hum.
So not a bridge over troubled water.
It's not a bridge, but that would be awesome. But I'm curious what the Alcatraz prisoners think. If someone we know is a journalist and could get them on the horn, they got to hear it. What do they got to say about it?
Well, Alcatraz is no longer an active prison.
What?
Yeah.
I've been there. How did I not know that?
Yeah. It's a tourist destination, but
I've literally been there a few years ago. Why did I just say that? I'm such an idiot.
You're not an idiot.
I'm just exhausted.
Yeah. Sometimes you just assume a jail is still open, even though it hasn't been open in several decades.
I literally went in a cell.
Yeah. As a prisoner or as a tourist?
As a tourist. As a prisoner, okay. Guys, I have a confession to make.
There's typically, the way you know you're a tourist at a jail is you can leave. And so...
Don't have to tunnel your way out.
Important distinction. But
important question. Do you think those prisoners swam across are still alive?
Well, wasn't how many actually got across?
3. Well, 2, I think they know for sure.
I don't know, but
I personally
it
think
was it was a
yes.
long time ago that they escaped, so maybe they're dead now, but I would not be surprised if they
I think they survived.
survived for a while.
Yeah. What's your weird
Well,
news?
also related to a body of water, however, instead of the bridge, this is about a monster. We're going over to Scotland for my weird news item about the Loch Ness monster. Right.
Yes.
So, spoiler, she still hasn't been seen, at least not recently. But what you can do is if you've ever thought, you know what, I think I could really find Nessie. Just give me a crack at it. Let me take a look at the water. I'll find her. I will prove that Nessie exists. All I need to do is go to Loch Ness. Well, you sort of can now because there is the website Nessie on the Net. It's a site dedicated to researching and spotting the Loch Ness monster, and you too can now keep an eye on the lake anywhere, anytime via a 24-hour live stream that's broadcast from a hilltop property overlooking the lake in the Scottish Highlands. It also offers a really nice view of like a sheep's pasture. Occasionally you'll see a
Lovely.
sheep.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's
That's
actually
like
quite peaceful.
totally. That's like a nice thing if you work from home to like have that just pulled up on like a separate computer and just have it be like your calming moment. And then maybe you
Right.
see Nessie.
Well, chances are good that if you're probably making coffee or not paying attention to the live stream at the time that Nessie pokes her
Always,
head
isn't
out.
it? Yep.
But it's fairly calm water, so if you do notice something popping out of there, you'll probably notice it if you're watching at the right time. So this is definitely a big leap forward as far as investigation of Nessie, because the first sighting of Nessie goes back to the 6th century, and then there's been multiple sightings throughout the years, and of course there was the 1933 photo that was made famous, which was then pretty easily debunked. So who knows? Maybe people out there can find their own proof o Nessie. And I want to give a shout out to mentalfloss.com, great site, for turning me on to this particular story and letting me know that I can go check out. I actually, when I lived in Scotland many years ago, I did visit Loch Ness. I've probably told this story before, and I went for a swim in it very briefly. It was quite cold. Didn't
Did I
encounter
know that
Nessie.
you lived in Scotland?
I don't know what you know,
I don't know if I
but
knew that. How
I've
long did
probably
you live there
mentioned it
for?
before. Only about a year,
Huh.
but it was a long time ago.
That's
So,
cool.
yeah. So we're gonna dive into our first story, but first, how about a word from some of our sponsors? Like we have so many. We're going to talk about Madame Morbid, Madame Morbid's trolley tours. Now, I've asked this question a couple times. Going to ask it again. Britt, is Brooklyn one of the most haunted places in America?
Who knows?
Good answer. It is a worthwhile question. And it's a good question for our podcast because this podcast, NightMerica, is brought to you by Brooklyn's one and only mobile ghost tour. That's Madame Morbid's trolley tours. It is the official haunted tour of NightMerica. Madame Morbid's Victoria-era funeral-inspired trolley is the best way to cruise around Brooklyn and learn all about its haunted history as well as some true crime. They are currently off the road. They've been social distancing and chasing ghosts. However, they're probably close to reopening now that New York City is phasing opening. But they do have gift cards available, so when they reopen, you can buy those gift cards and then go check out the tour. So be sure to check out madamorbid.com and give them a follow at madamorbidnyc to support your local ghost tour. And by the way, the answer is yes. Well, according to them, Brooklyn is haunted. I can't independently verify, but I think it's a pretty good bet.
I mean, I probably can independently verify. Once when we were recording, the lights in your apartment flickered. So I feel like that means Brooklyn is haunted.
That is pretty solid evidence right there. It's a good bet. I just haven't taken the ghost census to find out, so who knows.
Who knows?
So we're going to talk a little bit about things related to carnivals today.
Hmm?
Did you go to, did you ever go to carnivals or carnies when you were either living abroad or here?
Yeah,
They're separate from theme parks
they're
because
separate
they're
from theme
not.
parks. I touched on this a little bit during our amusement park episode that like the carnies in Europe are super sad. There's like weirdly drugged animals and like children having to do weird things like tightrope walk and stuff like that. So the carnivals in Europe are really sad. But when we moved to America, I was in seventh grade, so I haven't been to any like American carnivals because I kind of like outgrew the age for them, I think. And there's like not a ton of carnivals in Chicago. But you've been to carnivals.
I've been to carnivals. A lot of the things I went to when I was younger would be typically classified as state fairs,
Mm.
which I think are very close to carnivals. I
Did
may
you
have
get like
said
a
this.
fried Snickers bar?
No,
State
that
fair
was
food is the best.
I have had that, but that was not something I encountered until later in life. And oddly enough, living in Scotland in Glasgow, they have these fried Mars bars, which
Oh, I
are
love a
famous
Mars.
there. But for me, I don't know if I mentioned this story before, but I don't have a fear of clowns that some people do. I can find them quite creepy. What is it called? Colorophobia, maybe? Is that the name of it?
I don't know.
I don't have a fear of clowns like some people do. However, I do recall being a child going to a carnival and having my face painted
Mhm.
as a clown, and then seeing it in a mirror or a picture that was
Mhm.
taken of me and being like freaking out, like being terrified, not liking that I suddenly looked like this other thing. Hated it, and I hated the feel of the makeup on my face. The whole thing. Didn't care for it. So that's my takeaway from carnivals. And I've also been to Coney Island, so which is not a carnival, but it's 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 close. They have
I've
carnies
never
there in
been.
Coney
That's like
Island.
the top of my New York to-do list. It was what I wanted to do this summer is go to Coney Island at some point.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can still go. But
Mhm.
anyhow, so that's my carnival story going into this. But what tale are you bringing to our Nightmericans today?
So Nightmericans, my story is crazy. So stay with me, but we're about to go on like a legit crazy Carney coaster right now. I am telling the story of Elmer McCurdy, who was born in 1880 to a single woman. The scandal in 1880. And she was embarrassed to have her child out of wedlock, so she actually got her brother to adopt him and raise him as his own because the brother was married. Um, but as a teen, his adopted father passed away, and his mother came back into the picture and told him that she was his actual mother. So, like Ted Bundy and Charles Manson, already his life is like starting out on a rough note. Um, after his teen years, he became a really heavy drinker. He was a plumber, and in 1898, he actually lost his job due to drinking and had to just kind of move across the country trying to find work. In 1910, he decided to move on to a new career venture, as some of us are in life, and he decided to become a bank robber and a train robber. So he and some buddies robbed an Iron Mountain Pacific train because he heard there was $4,000 on board. They stopped the train, found the safe, and because he had experience using nitroglycerin, he decided to use that to bust it open. However, Lil Elmer used way too much and ended exploding the safe and burning all of the money inside of it.
That's rookie move for a bank or
Rookie
a
move,
safe
Elmer.
cracker, I guess.
Yep. There were $450 of silver coins in there. Despite being mostly melted, he was able to pry them off of the exploded safe, and they took them, but you have to imagine his buddies were probably pretty pissed. So a year later, he and two other friends decided to rob a bank in Kansas. They start this by breaking into the back wall with a hammer, which took 2 hours. Like if you hear someone breaking into, like tapping into your wall for 2 hours, you're not going to see what's going on. Anyway, Elmer decided to hit the outer wall of the vault with nitroglycerin. Again, they're letting this dude use this. He used too much, of course. He exploded the door, but to the outer safe, but they were still able to get inside to the inner safe. However, Elmer had used way too much nitroglycerin outside, and they had completely run out by the time they got to the inside vault, and they couldn't open it. So they just took $100 in gold coins that was sitting outside of the safe and ran away.
Okay.
His final act of crime was in October of 1911 when he and two other accomplices, apparently there's like no shortage of dudes that will do crimes with this idiot, decide to rob a bank that had $400,000 on it in 1911. It had $400,000. That's $12 million in today dollars. So, I mean, what kind of train carries that much cash? Anyway, so they thought they could do this. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. They ended up stopping the wrong train and getting on board that, attacking the people on the train, and all they walked off with was $46 and 2 bottles of whiskey.
Wow, these guys are doofuses.
Such doofuses. But we aren't even at the carnival yet, so how does that happen? He got caught by the sheriffs as they were walking away from the train, and he got shot in the chest and died. So, because no one in the area knew him, he was brought to an undertaker. They're in Pawhuska, Oklahoma at this point, so he was taken to an undertaker there. And the undertaker propped him up in a corner after preserving his body and charged people a nickel to come in and look at him. 2 carnival promoters heard about this story, and they went to this undertaker and claimed to be his brothers and took his body, but then, of course, put him on display as the embalmed bandit at the Great Patterson Carnival Show. So it's a traveling carnival, and they had him on display in each of these towns until 1922. His embalmed body toured the country for 11 years until they ended up selling him to another carnival guy named Louis Sonny, who decided to change up how people would view Elmer now. And he required attendees of his carnival to buy tickets. And then they had to put the ticket in Elmer's dead mouth as a payment to see him.
I love it.
Like, where's the respect for this dude?
Well, to be fair, he wasn't a very respectable dude, and he was a terrible criminal. He probably made more money as a corpse than he made as a bandit.
Well, that's very true. So after being in Louis Sonny's carnival, he ended up being sold to 4 different carnivals over the years. And until 1976, which is 65 years after his death, the $6 Million Man TV show was filming an episode called The Carnival of Spies at the Long Beach Carnival in the ride The Laugh in the Dark. And during the shoot, a prop man decided to move a wax mannequin to the side, only to discover when he moved the body that the arm fell off and it exposed human bone and muscle tissue. So immediately they called the police, and thanks to Louis Sonny making them put tickets in his mouth, they were able to like examine Elmer's body, find this ticket stub, and connect the dots to realize that this was Elmer McCurdy. They thought like it was just a carnival prop until then. So in April of 1977, he was finally laid to rest in the Guthrie Cemetery in Oklahoma where he was shot. And to make sure his body would never be taken again, they poured 2 feet of concrete on top of the casket.
That's one way to keep him down.
Yeah, and that's the life story of Elmer McCurdy, who had more of a life after death.
What year was he first put into service as a carny sideshow?
1911.
1911. Interesting. Yeah, I love these tales of these carnival exhibits because, and we'll be talking about this for the Patreon exclusive minisode, which you guys should check out our Patreon and subscribe if you want to hear it. But there's so many exhibits out there. There are these weird stories of things that were passed off as real monsters or artifacts from another time, or there's things like the Fiji mermaid. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's a
No.
pretty famous one. And yeah, it's pretty cool. You can find some cool images online about it, but it was essentially this stitched together creature. I think it was a monkey, made to look like a mermaid and passed off to look like a mermaid. So and that was P.T. Barnum that was behind that. But anyhow, so the history of these odd exhibits, I love it. I love it so much, and that's actually connected to what my story is going to be. But before we get to that, let's get another word from another sponsor. So, as we record this, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. We're still quarantining. And if you think things have been bad during this, trust us. Trust us at NightMerica. It could be worse. Don't believe me? Then you should read Dead Run. Dead Run, the new sci-fi thriller from author Mike Maddox. A mysterious force is taking control of people's bodies and making them run to stay alive. And if you cannot keep running, you blow up. You blow up like spaghetti left in the microwave too long. This is the ad copy. This is not my wording, so you know it's true because they wrote it. You blow up like spaghetti left in the microwave too long. No hint of hyperbole from me on that. Story follows a group of weary survivors as they make their way through a hellish landscape where there's only one rule. Do you know what the rule is, Britt?
You gotta run to stay alive.
That's pretty much the rule. They put it more succinctly: run or die.
Oh, okay.
Because saying if you have a rule in the apocalypse, you want to keep it very short and succinct. So say like, first you want to stretch, and then you want to make certain that you limber up, and then nice run or die.
Spaghetti dinner beforehand.
Yeah, go straight to it. Run or die. So this is exactly why we should all be jogging every day if we can, and using our carbs effectively. So Dead Run, available only exclusively on Amazon Kindle. Dead Run by Mike Maddox. It's only like $3 too, so it's a good read for a good price. So check that out, Dead Run. And let's dive into my story. It's interesting. I think we've mentioned before on the podcast that we plan these things. We do, even though sometimes it may not seem like it. We do actually plan these episodes out.
We do.
Yeah. I almost feel like we should act like we don't, so that way when we come across looking really professional, better. It's right. But no, we do plan a little bit, but we don't know one another's stories most of the time. But then there's this interesting crossover. So you have a story of a corpse that was turned into this exhibit, a real man that many people assumed was probably fake.
Yeah.
And I have sort of the opposite story. So this is the story of the Cardiff Giant. It's one of my favorite stories out there, and it's a true bit of history. And we're going to flash back 153 years ago, 1867, and we're talking about the latter half of the 19th century after the Industrial Revolution, where the nation is entering into the Gilded Age. So this is a time of great prosperity and economic growth. And interestingly, many people are still maintaining a lot of religious beliefs. However, it was also a time of hoaxes where people were trying to put one over on another person. And so hoaxes were kind of big at this time. And this is perhaps the biggest hoax of American history. So let's go back to 1867. George Hull is a cigar maker. He's also an atheist, a skeptic, and apparently a bit of a card because he
Is
was.
this how you found the story? Because you love a cigar.
No, I do love a cigar. No, this has been one of my favorite stories for years. I first wrote about this story probably 10 years ago, but George Hull got into an argument with a revivalist preacher, so the story goes. And the revivalist preacher was citing, it was a Methodist reverend, I guess, citing the chapter in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, that states, "Giants once roamed the earth." Now, this preacher took it as a literalist, took it literally. The book of Genesis said there were giants that roamed the earth, said it had to be so. So George Hull got to thinking. And as an atheist, but as also, a entrepreneur and a bit of a prankster, he thought he might be able to pull one over on this preacher and maybe even make some money doing it. So over the next 2 years, Hull spent $3,000 of his own money to bring a giant to life. And so that was about $50,000
That's
in
a
that
lot.
day's times. Yeah. So he traveled to Iowa. He secured a 5-ton block of gypsum, said that it was going, it's a stone, claimed that it was going to be used to create a statue of Abraham Lincoln. Hull then took this slab to Chicago, and this marble dealer, Hull actually posed as a model, but this marble dealer and these sculptors carved this stone into this fake giant, this anthropological wonder. So the statue looks like a naked man lying on his back, somewhat twisted, his arms over his stomach, and the workers poured acid on the exterior of this thing to make it look aged and eroded, and
Mm.
Hull used pins to replicate skin pores. And when it was done, this giant was 10 feet tall and 4.5 inches, 10 feet and 4.5 inches tall, and it weighed 2,990 pounds.
Jeez.
It's big. Yeah, it's really big.
Big.
So, okay. So now Hull has his giant, and it looked good. But what's he do with it? Okay, he now goes back to Cardiff, New York. And in Cardiff, he had a relative named William Stubb Newell. Stubb is a great nickname. I'm going to maybe adopt that.
I'm
So,
going to call you Stub.
Stubb, Stubby, Stubb,
Stubby
Stubster.
is not a very fortunate nickname.
No, Stubby isn't. Stubster.
Like you want me to call you
Stubba,
Stubby.
Stubberino. Stubb. Anyhow, so Stubb and Hull pulls him in on the deal, and on November 1868, Hull buries this giant near Stubbs farm. And they put it under roots and everything to make it look like it had been under the earth, under the
Mm,
dirt for a long, long
smart.
time. Hull goes back to his home. He lived in Binghamton, New York. Goes about his cigar business. A year passes. This thing's underground for a year. And October 16th, 1869, Stubb decides he's going to dig a well near his barn, near this site. So he hires these workers to dig a well. And looking back, it was actually not a really great place to put a well, so someone should have noticed that. But anyhow, these guys, whatever, they're taking the money, they start digging a well, and then they find this body, this massive giant under the ground.
Bum, bum,
And
bum.
word spreads fast. And according to the Syracuse Journal in 1869, quote, men left their work. Women caught up their babies and children in numbers. All hurried to the scene where the interest of that little community centered. So Cardiff already had a history of fossil deposits. So people thought that this was an ancient man who had been petrified in the waters by a nearby swamp, or an ancient swamp. And then there was, I believe, Stubb said, whatever, I'm going to just rebury this thing and forget about it. They're like, no, 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 you have to display this. This is, in fact, evidence of Genesis. It's true. So this prehistoric man now was considered a new wonder of the world, a singular discovery by the newspapers at the time, like the Syracuse Daily Journal. And crowds, as they came, they wanted to see it. So what happened is they cover the giant with a white tent, and they start charging 50 cents for admission. And I think that was about maybe $4 or something of that day's, maybe close to $5 of that time's money. So 50 cents for admission. And people came. They came in droves, and people tried to buy the giant off of Stubb, because nobody knew Hull was involved at this moment. Turned him down. Eventually, they did sell this giant for $30,000. And again,
Back then.
for perspective, yeah, when they sold that for $30,000, that was, or close to $30,000, it was about $465,000. So this was a syndicate. They sold it to a syndicate of 5 guys, and those guys then decide that they're going to tour around with this thing. Now, at this point, level-headed people were also saying this is a load of bunk. There was a geologist named James Hall and a Rochester University professor named Henry Ward. And actually, no, I'm wrong. Those guys actually did say that this is a remarkable object. However, other scientists said this is bunk. This is just, Charles Marsh was the one that said this is a most decided humbug, which I love that word,
I
humbug.
love the word humbug.
Yeah, and it's not as good as triflers,
Ugh,
but was that
Belle,
your
my
word,
girl.
triflers? Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay, so they're touring this thing around. They're making money. They're making bank. Well, who shows up? Showman P.T. Barnum. Now, I mentioned him earlier with the Fiji Mermaid. He knew how to put on a show, so he showed up and he offered to buy this thing. And this is sort of, it is now essentially a carnival. It's a road show. P.T. Barnum shows up. He wants to buy it and he wants to display it, but they say no. They're like, no, we're making so much money on this thing. Why would we do that? No. So what does P.T. Barnum do? This is like so awesome. P.T. Barnum makes his own giant. He builds an exact replica and he displays it at a museum in Manhattan. And he says this is the real Cardiff Giant, the real giant, not a fake like that other thing. And he runs ads. What is it? Said the ad. Is it a statue? Is it a petrification? Is it a stupendous fraud? Is it the remains of a former race? Drew huge crowds, outsold the original and making a ton of money off of it. However, what's that do? That then pisses off the guys that
Mm-hmm.
currently own it. And along the way, other people are making forgeries as well. But it was P.T. Barnum that was making a lot of money. And even at this time, the Philadelphia Inquirer, which a lot of people were openly calling this thing fake, both of them fake, the Philadelphia Inquirer said it's rather rich that we should be victimized by such a fraud upon a fraud. But again, the guys that own it are pissed off. So what do? They sue P.T. Barnum. And at this point, Hull, who now has a ton of money, kind of is open about the fact that this was a hoax. And people who had been on the case kind of exposed him as this. But no, people love a good story, so they believe it anyhow. But at this point, there was this lawsuit, and the syndicate of businessmen sue P.T. Barnum, and that leads to this court case. And the court case is that they're stealing our work, and it's a fraud. However, the ultimate revelation or result of this court case is, how can you sue for a fraud of a fraud? And out of all of
Mm.
this, yeah, and out of all of this is the famous quote that's associated with P.T. Barnum: "There's a sucker born every minute." It's not a P.T. Barnum quote, but it is connected to Barnum, and it's connected to the Cardiff Giant. It was actually uttered by a man named David Hunnam, who was talking about the Cardiff Giant. It wasn't a P.T. Barnum quote.
Hmm.
So anyhow, this thing it survived for a while, making a lot of money. And by 1880, it had fallen out of favor, and it was then condemned to storage in a barn in Massachusetts. And at that point, it seems like it would have slipped from memory.
Mm-hmm.
And George Hull actually went on to one up himself, because apparently it wasn't enough to get one good hoax out of it. He tried to bury another giant in Colorado, which everybody was onto, like, okay, dude, like, yes, you found
Yeah,
two
we get it,
giants.
dude.
So anyhow, he didn't quite succeed with that one. But so the Cardiff Giant, however, was eventually purchased. It moved around the carnival circuit once more, and then it ended up at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York, which is also the home of the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
And that is currently where it lies. It's on display at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York, and you can go check it out. And I highly advise that you do, because the story of the Cardiff Giant was so big at the time that Mark Twain wrote about it.
Whoa. Author
L.
of my
Frank
least favorite
Baum,
book.
Huck Finn?
Yeah, I hate that book. I'm
Really?
sorry, America.
It's okay. Well,
He's no
he
J.D.
still,
Salinger.
he did, he still, well, he wrote more than J.D. Salinger, but at least more notable things. Anyhow, Mark Twain wrote about it in sort of a humorous essay, talking about the ghost of the Cardiff Giant haunting him. So that's like paranormal on top of paranormal. It was a humorous essay, though. And then even L. Frank Baum, the
Mm.
author of
Mm-hmm.
The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, wrote about it as well, and it came to his attention. So this thing really just captured the attention of so many people, all because George Hull just kind of wanted to be a prankster and a dick and show up a revivalist preacher and take him for a ride. So I think that's like a pretty excellent piece of American history and the greatest hoax of American history.
It is. I have several questions.
Yes.
Does this feel to you the way that Belle Gunness feels to me? Because he's a prankster that wants to take down some crazy religious person and he loves cigars. Like, does it feel very at home for you?
You mean, am I George Hull?
Yeah. Like the way I love Belle Gunness, do you love this dude?
I love the story because even at this time of the Gilded Age, I think, and I think you could draw parallels to what's going on to modern times. People see what they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those who were believers, they could look at the Cardiff Giant as proof of the literal word of the Bible. But for scientists and skeptics, it was obviously a fraud and it was a joke. And then the people that did believe in it were fools for believing in it.
Mm.
So, and when you look at this thing now, you might think, well, that's obviously just a statue, a sculpture, but the lead up to all of it was so impressive. And at that time, finding it, even though science wasn't what it is now, but science was advancing, but people could easily buy that this was a petrified man. So,
Yeah, that's what
it,
I'm wondering. Is it bones or it's like a full body?
the image, it's a full body. It's a full
Hmm.
body. It's not just bones. You can see some rib cage. You can also see the Cardiff giant
Is it
Cardiff, if you
giant?
will. Well, he's 10 feet tall, so proportionately, it's quite the large.
I'm here to tell you, not all men are proportionate.
Okay, well, I'm here to take you at your word, but yeah, he's got a wang. He's got a he's got a petrified dick, and
Well, I'm just
and
wondering, like, how do people not? I'm trying to pull up a picture now, but my internet's slow. How, if it's like a
you're like
body?
petrified dick. Tap 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 tap. I have to look this up. Stat.
Okay,
Where can
I'm
I
looking at
find?
it now. He kind of twists his legs like he's
Right.
like reclining. How do how did people not realize this is fake?
Because again, people believe what they wanted to
Mm.
believe. The New York Daily Tribune ran a front page story about the giant. It got national attention. The Chicago Tribune wrote about it. I think they were debunking it. The Philadelphia Inquirer. This was something that captured the attention of people for a couple years. Yeah, the Chicago Tribune published an expose on it. They included, I mean, it captured so many imaginations that they did investigative journalism to hunt down the truth, and they actually got the confessions from the stoneworkers who carved it under Hull's guidance. So, yeah, I mean, but it still made money.
Hmm.
And yeah, people believe what they want to believe. But on
I
top of
get it.
that, even though I do like cigars and I like larger than life characters, I don't I am amused by George Hull. However, I don't really like the notion of pulling off hoaxes like this.
Yeah.
That's not really where I fit. I find it interesting though, and I think that this is just such a, even though this was 151 years ago that they first discovered the giant itself, I think you could easily make something happen to some sort of parallel to today when people see the face of Jesus in their toast
Toast. Yep.
or whatever it may be. People are going to believe what they want to believe, and I think that even extends to, look, go on Facebook, look at the
Yep.
misinformation
Oh
that
Lord.
is outwardly dangerous and easily spread without people fact checking it. So in some
Yep.
ways, people never change. So
Yep. Speaking of
anyhow,
outwardly dangerous, for our female listeners, I'm looking up pictures of the Cardiff Giant. Dad, you might want to fast forward like 15 seconds. But the weens goes down about mid thigh. So, in case anyone
you
was curious.
you say weens plural? There's only one ween.
Well, it's just one ween, but weens sounds, better, I think.
Okay, I guess so. So all those listeners out there, if you don't like weens, petrified dick, or Cardiff giant Cardiff, then you too can help with the NightMerica contest. Submit your favorite name for the Cardiff Giant's phallus. And you can
Yes.
win. I don't know what they win. You can win a. I don't know.
We'll
I
figure
I used
something
to
out.
I used to have a magnet of the Cardiff Giant on my refrigerator. I might
You
still have
don't.
it somewhere, and otherwise you would have seen his wings earlier when you first came to my house. So anyhow, that's the story of Cardiff Giant, a carnival tale, and interestingly, a nice compliment to your story because
Yeah.
yeah, dead man.
We
That so go on.
No, I was just gonna say we probably should tell each other what our stories are gonna be. Otherwise, we're gonna roll up someday. Or we need like a secret keeper. Like we tell one person and then they can say like, no, you can't do that story. You
Well,
know what I
if
mean?
enough people subscribe to this podcast and we get some ad revenue and all of that, that's when we can hire an intern and a
True.
separate producer and then a secret keeper. I would say a secrets keeper is probably producer, intern, secrets keeper. I think once you get to secrets keeper, you know you found success in the podcast
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
which is why all of you out there should tell people about this podcast and spread it around to your friends and neighbors
Yeah.
and whatnot safely at a social distance. But with that said, let's check in for some paranormal pop culture and what we are into in the entertainment world this week. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm super excited now that my HR test is done and I can do things that are fun. I am going back to reading a book by Tana French. I'm sure any of my like mystery, true crimey book nerds know Tana French's name. She's really beloved in like the mystery community. I'm reading a book called The Witch Elm. Um, which is one of her really well-known books, and I'm like probably about halfway done with it. And she's just such an interesting author because I'm so used to reading like mystery books that are like, like Riley Sager's books where like you can't put them down and every page turn has some twist or turn to the story. Tana French is just a really beautiful author in the fact that she weaves this whole background story before ever even getting to the crime in question. So it's also just a really good book. But yeah, I'm excited to finally be reading like good literature and not just like HR laws. What
Yeah,
about
not
you?
really.
What's yours?
HR laws, I suppose, could be good literature if they.
I mean, there's some like really interesting one. Like there's one, the GINA Act. It's like the Genetic Information Act, where like the military can't not hire you because of like what your genetic information says. Like there's this whole thing about the military like has to hire you even if like your genetic information says weird information. I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff out there that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I am going in a different direction. One thing I want to say is going back to Cardiff Giant. I do want to, even though I've done a lot of my own research on this, I do want to give credit to history.com and livescience.com and the smithsonianmag.com. They were all additional resources for this and added some more color to a story that I've already known and loved for many years. But I digress after digressing. So for me, I am still in the early stages of reading it. However, there is a Bigfoot book of fiction out there. It is called De-Evolution or Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre. And it is
Sasquatch
written
Massacre?
Sasquatch massacre, as in the Sasquatch massacring other people. But
Oh.
I assume I'm still in the early stages. However, so this is written by Max Brooks, and if you don't know Max Brooks is a great guy. Worked with him a couple times in the past on like Comic-Con panels, and he is best known for essentially launching the modern zombie wave. He is a big fan
Hmm.
of George Romero's zombies, but he wrote World War Z in the Zombie Survival Guide.
Mhm.
And so he became quite famous for that. And now he's moving into the world of Bigfoot. And the setup for this, I love World War Z, the book, not so much the movie, but I love, love, love the book, love the audio play of it. Great, great listening, great reading. And with this, he sort of takes that similar pseudo factual documentarian style approach, and there are elements within the book that are actually factual, like Teddy Roosevelt in 1893 wrote about his own experience with a potential Sasquatch. That did happen.
What?
That actually, yes, that did actually happen. So he Brooks includes real factual footnotes and then interviews with a park ranger, things like that. But then we have sort of this fictional account told through the diary of a missing woman who was part of this sort of hippie community that apparently encountered a terrible Sasquatch situation. So anyhow, that's set in Mount Rainier. So yeah, I'm in the early stages, but I'm quite enjoying it. And it also reminded me as I'm reading this, so there's not a whole lot of not a ton of good Bigfoot fiction out there. There's been some attempts.
True.
Terry and the Hendersons. There's a bunch of fun horror movies out there, but you can't talk about Bigfoot fiction without talking about Bigfoot erotica. Have you ever heard of Bigfoot erotica?
No.
Well, I'm going to tell you all about it.
Oh my God, Dad,
So
please stop listening. The episode ended.
I'm not going to read Bigfoot erotica. I'm just going to
Okay.
talk about it. Yeah, I'm going to read my own Bigfoot erotica.
Don't act like you haven't written any.
I'm using this podcast as a chance to really launch my career as a Bigfoot erotica author. No, but it is a thing.
This might be the funniest thing to picture ever.
It really is a thing. Like I first wrote about Bigfoot erotica. I did not write it. I wrote about Bigfoot erotica back in 2014 because there was a woman or an author named Virginia Wade who wrote a some Bigfoot erotica stories that were actually published in Penthouse and ended up being a 3-volume, 16-book Bigfoot erotica opus, a magnum opus, a Bigfoot opus. And she was making something like $30,000 a month in Amazon Kindle downloads. This is going back to 2014. I don't know what she's making now. And her book was downloaded. The one book in 2012 was downloaded more than 100,000 times. So there's a lot of people that are into the Bigfoot erotica. Now, but and I think even Anne Rice commented on it that she was in
What?
awe of how much money that this Bigfoot erotica was making. I will give you one quote from Virginia Wade's story. There's more to this too. I don't know. I'm springing this on you. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. This might be my favorite thing we've ever talked about on the podcast ever.
A quote from one of the books. The it was translated into German. I mean, it was so successful. This woman was able
Oh
to
my
put her
God.
daughter through college and all that good stuff. She was
If
even
she's
interviewed by
listening, can
Business
she
Insider.
please be a guest on the podcast? Please.
Yeah.
We'll be
So
professional, we promise.
so the one story, I think it was Come for Bigfoot was the name of one of the books, but and I'm not even joking, Virginia Wade's story was about two Sasquatches named Leonard and Dale, and they have a thing with a human lover. And one quote from one such experience was, quote, "Our mornings always began like this, my warm body buzzing with arousal. My Sasquatch lovers, who had an almost insatiable appetite for sex, would pleasure me shortly. From within the tufts of matted hair, the creature released a huge pale bleep that defied logic. So,
So they were in a plural relationship too. Very, very like of the moment.
Sasquatches don't follow our societal constraints. Anyhow, that was what I was thinking about. But there was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there was a congressional race in Virginia. It was the Virginia's 5th congressional district between Denver Riggleman, who was a Republican, and Leslie Cockburn. Yeah,
Oh
well,
God.
both of them are a good name.
Both of them
and Leslie
are good
Cockburn.
names.
And things got nasty in this congressional race because the Democratic candidate Leslie Cockburn accused her Republican opponent Riggleman of, quote, being a devotee of Bigfoot erotica. And she went on to say, this is not what we need on Capitol Hill. So
what is it with Republicans being into weird sex stuff?
That led to a revelation that Riggleman indeed wrote a story called, he was a co-author of a book called Bigfoot Exterminators, Inc., the partially cautionary, mostly true tale of a monster hunt in 2006. He also wrote Mating Habits of Bigfoot and Why Women Want Him. So that's a must read. I need to pick that one up.
You do.
What can I learn from Bigfoot?
Yeah.
But yeah, indeed, he was a author of some Bigfoot erotica. He would talk about Sasquatch's junk on his own social media.
Wow.
And
So what's your Sasquatch erotica pen name? Stubbs McCockburn?
Yeah, for the Scottish audience, because I really like, and the McCockburn makes it classy.
It does.
But Stubbs McCockburn, yes. That'll also be the name
when I... a t-shirt that says Stubbs McCockburn. For
Congress.
Yeah.
So this took a weird turn.
It did take a weird turn, but I love it.
Well, I was just, as I've been reading this book, Max Brooks's book, it's a good book, but I can't help but think about Bigfoot literature and literature. I don't know, maybe I'll get further into Max's book and I'll get some hot Bigfoot sexy time happening. Hope. So
please report back for next week's Paranormal Pop Culture.
I can't tell you how long I could continue talking about this topic because I know way too much about
Maybe
Bigfoot
we should do a mini-sode on this.
Based on how much I've written about it in the past for paranormalpopculture.com, there was some pretty cheeky, fun stuff. So there's also alien erotica. There's all sorts of erotica. But anyhow, hey, look, whatever. As long as it's consensual between the humans, the Bigfoot, the aliens, we're all about consensual.
We're all about it, man.
Paranormal
love
sex. Yeah, cryptids, aliens, whatever. As long as they're cool with it, we're cool with it. So
we're cool with it. And that's the story from me and Stubbs this week.
Yeah. Stubbs McCockburn coming at you live from NightMerica.
Oh, great. If you like NightMerica, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us a follow on social media and share this with your friends.
And if you'd like to share your paranormal stories or even seek paranormal advice, which is for entertainment purposes only, email nightmericashow@gmail.com.